Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, episode 260, Widows Unfiltered, an interview with Stephanie Hester-Rodriguez.
Welcome to the Widowed Mom Podcast, the only podcast that offers a proven process to help you work through your grief, to grow, evolve, and create a future you can truly look forward to. Here's your host, Master Certified Life Coach, Grief Expert, Widow, and Mom, Krista St-Germain.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the podcast. So first of all, it is my birthday today. If you are listening on the day that this podcast episode releases, it is my birthday, and I have a request for you. Would you, as a birthday present to me, if this podcast has helped you, would you please go leave a review on whatever format you listen to the podcast? And the reason that's important to me is because I really want more widows to hear this podcast. There are 11 million widows in the US alone. And the more I can get this information in the hands of other widows, the better. And the more you rate and review the podcast, the more that happens. So if you would do that, I would be so grateful as a birthday present to me. Okay. Today I have for you a special guest, Stephanie Hester-Rodriguez. You are going to love her. I love her. And it's times like this where I really have to pinch myself sometimes. We just got done doing the interview. And then usually what happens is I do the interview and then I go back and then I record the intro like I'm doing now. And so I just did this interview with Stephanie. And after I hit stop record and sat there for a minute, I just kind of have to pinch myself because this is what I get to do for a living. These are the types of people that I get to meet. These are the types of journeys that I get to be a part of. And I am still not happy that Hugo died. I still don't wish that that had happened. And I am also so grateful that I have gotten to meet and work with and come to know and connect with women like Stephanie. So I love her. I know you're going to love her. And without further ado, we'll let you get into the interview. All right. Welcome, Stephanie, to the podcast. I'm happy that you are here.
Hey, Krista. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I love you. I love you. Okay. So I'm not going to introduce you because I would rather you introduce yourself. So why don't you tell the listeners just a little bit about you, whatever you want people to know.
So I'm Stephanie. I am a mom to two kiddos. My son just turned 13 and my daughter turns 18 on Saturday and then graduates 2 weeks later. So I'm right in the whirlwind of all the senior moments with her. And as my firstborn and my admittedly mini me, there's lots of thoughts and emotions wrapped up in that experience. I am also an avid gardener, which anyone who spends any length of time with me knows a lot about. I'm also a duck mom. So I have some babies that are feathered and two dogs, but no one's near as impressed by the dogs as they are as the ducks. And the goose. Pope John Paul IV, whom my daughter named, is our goose.
Fantastic.
I also love to read, particularly interested in the World War II era of historical fiction. And I'm actually taking my daughter on a trip, her senior trip to Europe. And so we're going to Normandy, which I'm very excited about to share that with her. Something I did when I was about her age. So, and then of course, I'm also a widow. And then daughter, sister, friend, lover of Jesus, all the things to lots of people.
I love it. I also did not know that you were a World War II enthusiast. I had no idea. That's news to me. Yeah, learning new things. But Stephanie's my go-to person when I have a plant question.
I love it. It's we'll chat all day long. I've got lots of.
What do I do with this mint? What's happening? What's wrong with my mint, Stephanie?
And for anybody listening, do not put it in a bed. Put it in a pot or it'll take over.
Yes. That is the one thing I actually did know because I remember having an old coworker who didn't do that. And I learned from her that it was everywhere and she couldn't do anything to get rid of it. So I do know that a little bit. So, okay. So I did not go back and look and see when you joined Mom Goes On, but it feels like you've been around for so long, which I'm so glad for, right? But talk to us about that. Like, how did you get into Mom Goes On? Whatever you're comfortable sharing as far as how you became a widow. Yeah.
So actually April of 2022 was my first month for
It
Mom
seems
Goes
like
On,
so
but
much longer than that to me.
time is a weird thing, Krista. But to backtrack a little bit, and I thought about how to kind of tell this story. And I was like, well, best stories begin at the beginning. And so in summer of 2004, I met what would become my husband when we started working for the same company. He was already there, and I started working for the same telecommunications company. And we became friends, funny enough, over a blue collar comedy joke, the weird things that happen. And so over the next several years, we just had a really great friendship. He was hysterical, incredibly funny and charming, and always had the best jokes. And then the summer of 2007, we started dating, and what I thought was going to be just some fun, lighthearted experiences turned into something far more serious come fall. And by the end of October, I knew like that's where my heart and my future was going to be. And so fast forward a little bit, we got married actually April 16th of 2010. And we have my daughter, like I said, is about to turn 18. My son just turned 13. He had a son from his first marriage who's a year older than my daughter. And so just started this life of, ups and downs. I got pregnant the summer after we got married. I was incredibly sick when I was pregnant. One of those where I could do one thing a day, and I was working part-time. And on the days that I worked, I got up, I showered, I went to work, I came home, and I went to bed. And that was the extent of what I was able to do. And so he was incredible and picked up all the extra slack from helping take care of our daughter and stuff around the house and everything that I just physically couldn't do. And then our son was born, and just kind of, life kept going. We had some incredible adventures. We went to Italy on our honeymoon. I love to travel. I took him to Africa with me on a missions trip the summer before we got married. He's from Dallas. And so we spent a lot of time on the road between here and there, visiting friends and family, and just, building a life that we thought would last forever. And then, as happened with a lot of people in 2020, life just changed and stood still. Neither one of us had a job that we could stop doing during COVID. I work for a nonprofit. I couldn't just work from home. Like, you can't do services from home. So I kept going to work. He kept going to work, and we just kind of made it work. But come fall of 2021, our luck in never having COVID ran out, and he contracted COVID at the beginning of September. By the end of September, he was not getting any better. I did. And so by this point, I'm trying to take care of him, not knowing like what's going on. And so one day I really just thought he was incredibly dehydrated. So I called one of those mobile IV places that'll come to your home. And thankfully, the person that came out was an off-duty firefighter. And he showed up, and he was like, he needs to go to the hospital, and immediately called an ambulance. And that's the last time. Oh my God, I really thought I'd do it.
Yeah, it's okay.
So he went into the hospital that night, straight into ICU. They still had COVID ICUs then. The next day, they put him on a ventilator. It was his choice. The doctor was like, he's aware enough that I've told him kind of what's happening and what his oxygen levels were, and he's not getting enough air. So they put him on a vent, and which meant he would be in a medically induced coma, just in hopes that his body could rest and heal. 3 weeks later, unfortunately, healing, at least in the way that we wanted, is not what happened. And he passed October 15th of 2021.
Yeah. So fast.
Yeah.
To go from really healthy and best days in front of you to, yeah. What had been your experiences and understandings of grief before he died?
So I had lost both of my grandfathers, my parents' dads had passed away. My dad's dad before I was born, my mom's dad when I was super young. So knowledge of death just kind of, I grew up with. And then my senior year in high school, my mom's mom passed away, who lived next door to us, who I was incredibly close to. And I think that's the first time I came face to face on really what it like effect it could have on a life, because then just a lot of day-to-day changes. And I struggled for several months, even into my freshman year in college, and just trying to process that grief. And there's not a lot to help people out there walk through what that looks like. I remember I did go see a counselor, and the one thing that she told me that stuck out, which you're going to be floored, is she was like, it takes 6 months for every 10 years that you knew someone to be able to grieve and get over it. And at the time, that was like permission that it was okay that I was still like sad and upset. But now I'm like, you cannot give that formula to people. Please don't do that.
Please stop misinforming the people. Yeah.
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 And then we lost a friend from high school in a car accident my sophomore year in high school. And then my other grandmother passed away actually when I was pregnant with my son. And then scattered family members throughout. And so it's not that I never had dealt with it. It's just different when it's your person.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What do you remember from the early days? What was it like in like what we would call acute grief?
So I was never the one that like just stayed in bed, and I was the next day, you just got up, you put one foot in front of the other, and like you just do whatever's next. I had kids, and I didn't think I had the option to do anything other than just keep going for them, for myself. I still believed there was purpose in my life. I couldn't quite figure out what the rest of it was going to look like. That deep belief of purpose, I think, was still there, which is why just one foot in front of the other kind of made sense. And my kids are kind of that way too. 3 out of the 5 days the week after he passed, they were in school.
Wow.
But that's
3 out of 5.
That's what they wanted to do. They didn't want to be at home and just sit in it. We actually had a lot of time. They didn't want to be home at all. I think it was just hard to be at home. And so being busy for them was just easier, and probably for me too.
Yeah, it makes complete and total sense. Yeah. So at what point, since you never really stopped, was there kind of like did you even take a break from work? Did you just go right back?
I took a week off the week after he passed. He passed on a Friday. That next week I was off. We had a service that next Friday. And then that next Monday I was back at work.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. What kind of support were you getting? What were you leaning into? What was helping you?
So I am a very big component of therapy. So I have a therapist that I I'm going to say love because we have a long-standing relationship that I
Mhm.
love and trust and
Yeah.
had been seeing before my husband passed away. So there was an existing relationship there.
Yep.
And so I just kind of tried to lean hard into that. And once a week, every Friday morning, I was sitting on his couch and there were lots of tears. Unfortunately, as I'm sure we'll get into, a large part of my problem and the struggle I was having after my husband passed was my faith and some of those things that
Mhm.
were so foundational for me my entire life now felt so uncertain and even untrue
Mm.
that it's like when you're standing on the edge of a cliff and you can feel parts of it start to like give way. And you're like,
Mm.
okay, like where do I stand now? Because this is no longer safe.
Yeah, that's a powerful metaphor. So can you kind of like paint the picture for people? What was your like faith tradition foundation
Sure.
before, and then what did happen? How did it change?
So I grew up in church. We were a every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night family. I was incredibly involved in my church. I'm in the church choir. My husband was too. I teach preschool crafts in Bible school. I attend the church I grew up in still. So I have people that I go to church with that held me as a baby,
Yeah.
that have held my kids as a baby. And so those relationships are a very big part of my life. And I mean, I went to a Baptist college. What I believed in my relationship with God was always that one thing in my life that I could be sure of.
Mm.
When other things let me down, that was the one thing I could always count on. And then when my husband passed, all of a sudden, that was no longer true for me. And so that's when I was like, I don't know what to do now.
Mhm. Yeah. What's that like when you're used to getting support and community and I mean, I'm going to say safety. I don't know if that's a word that rings true to you, but like, what's it like to then not have it or question it or not to, to have it shift and change?
It was hard. I mean, the community was still there. We still went to church every Sunday morning. It was important for me
Okay.
to have
Mhm.
the kids there. And so they could still have that support and community that they knew and trusted and could count on. But it would be hard to sit in the pew on Sunday morning and try to sing songs about
Mm.
God's goodness and God's faithfulness when I was going through a period when I was like, I can no longer say it. Like, I
Mhm.
wasn't feeling like that God was good or faithful.
Mhm.
And that was shocking to me to be at the point where I couldn't say that.
Yeah.
And it was hard.
What did you do? Did you try to force yourself to say it? Did you just not?
No, I just cried through the
Yeah.
songs. I would have lots of inner dialogue anytime somebody got up there and started talking about it. And I'd be like, yeah, like you can tell you've never been through, or it must be nice to still believe that.
Mhm.
Or like, I mean, all of those things, like, I'll say there was a little bitterness that I was carrying around that I was surrounded by all these people who lived in a world that hadn't been shattered
Mhm.
and just be like, must be nice.
Mhm. Besides your therapist, were there people that you could be open and honest with about that, or were you just pretty much dealing with it by yourself?
I had a couple close friends that are also believers that I would have some conversations with. The problem was they had never been through
Mhm.
anything like this either. And so they would listen and be supportive and understand, but without like truly understanding.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
there wasn't a lot more than just a listening ear that they could do.
Mm-hmm. Did you sense your kids were going through similar struggles?
Not in the faith aspect. I think particularly for my daughter, she leaned really hard into that. And part of my struggle, and I will own it, is because I had certain expectations
Mm-hmm.
of God. And
Mm-hmm.
when he didn't meet those, I held him to those. And the problem was they're not anything he ever promised me.
Mm.
And like with a lot of things and people, if I'm holding people to expectations that they've never promised me, when they don't
Mm-hmm.
meet them, I'm going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
But it's not their fault because, like, they didn't promise me that. That's something that I have built in my own head. And so, but it took me a really long time before I could recognize and own that.
Mm-hmm. What was the process of like untangling it like for you? How did you do it?
It took over a year, which included 8 months of Mom Goes On before I
Mm-hmm.
was able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that was you sitting in front of me and being like, is this a belief you want to hold?
Mm-hmm.
And is this something you still want to think? And you talking about beliefs are just something you thought long enough.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you can go into theology and stuff about beliefs, but sometimes what I discovered is we're believing things that aren't true. And so what Mom Goes On was able to do for me was to look at everything and just lay it all out and be like, this is everything I believe,
Mm-hmm.
and figure out, okay, is that true?
Mm-hmm.
And why do you believe it? And do you want to continue to believe it?
Mm-hmm.
And then take a more active ownership of that belief. And then give myself permission to lay it down.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a few when I realized there were some expectations that I had of God that he never promised me. There was some stuff I had to lay down.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of freedom that comes in that, and with other people too, of just laying down those expectations,
Yeah.
particularly when no one's ever promised anything.
Did you feel like there was grief in that process of laying them down, or did it just mostly feel like relief or a combination?
No, I mean, it was a combination. I feel like there was grief woven throughout all of it. And I don't know how there could not be, because I mean, losing my husband just kind of was the catalyst of some of this. Those beliefs were there before, but this picture that we're promised that only bad things happen to bad people, like that's, I mean, we all know that is not accurate. And if you
Mm-hmm.
walk around life believing that, you are eventually going to just fall flat on your face, because that's just not how the world works. Sometimes life is random. COVID's one of the most random things I've ever seen. How it affects people and what it does and doesn't do. Like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
even know if we understand yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was just one more example of just like, yeah, we don't always understand or know, and we certainly can't ever predict.
Mm-hmm. So true. So challenging, right? When you've lived your whole life, this is not just for you, it's for all of us. So challenging when you've lived your whole life according to a certain set of beliefs, right? And there's safety and security, it seems, in those beliefs. And then when all of a sudden they no longer feel like they fit or apply, or they're maybe even doing harm, I think it can be such a confusing time. And also, can sometimes be not only confusing and painful, but also, I don't know how much you feel like you did this, but I see it a lot where we make ourselves wrong for
Mhm.
even questioning the things that we believed before or trying to figure it out, which then blocks us from being able to have a good, honest look and do what you did, really sift and sort and decide, okay, what do I want to keep? What do I want to lay down?
Yeah.
Yeah. I also feel like it's important for people to know I have no agenda for what you believe, right? For what anybody believes. My goal is to get you back on solid ground so that you feel good about what you believe, which is why I think there's so much diversity in terms of different faith traditions, different sets of beliefs within Mom Goes On, because it is not any particular type of program. And it's really meant to be a space where, without judgment, you really can look at what you believe and decide if it's something you want to keep or lay down or stay with. Yeah.
And there's a lot of safety in that for us to be able to put all of that, because we had several faith conversations and coaching sessions, and to not worry about like you trying to have any sort of sway one way or the other. So thank you.
My pleasure. And thank you. Like, that's what I want to do. Just help people get to their own answers, because you are the one that knows, right? Yeah. If you could go back in time, like to the early days of your grief, and tell yourself anything, support yourself in different ways. And really what this question is designed to get at is like, what can other people learn from what you now know that maybe you didn't know then?
I think one of the biggest things I thought is there was a way to speed walk my way through this process. That if I could just do the one foot in front of the other often enough, and then like I wouldn't be kind of stuck in this, just that oppressive weight that comes with grief. Because back then I thought there was going to be an end.
Yeah.
And that there was some magic pot at the end of a rainbow where like, okay, everything's going to be all better. And if I can just get there, then I'll be okay. Because I mean, less than 2 months after Noe passed away, I was binging like podcasts and just searching for everything to fix it all, because I thought I could like fixing it all could like speed the process through. And there's not. You have to take the time to feel all of it. One phrase I heard someone say is that grief will outweigh anything. And it's not going anywhere. So whenever like you stop, it's going to be there until like you just process it. So for any like A personality, or just anyone that thinks that like there's this magic point that you're going to reach, and that may sound terrifying, but I almost find it comforting in that there's like, it's the same for all of us, that we all have to feel like every single emotion that comes through.
Yeah, I had a similar experience, right? Like, okay, we're going to get the A, we're going to get the gold star, we're going to get through it quickly and do it the quote unquote right way. And then you realize after you're, down a ways, wherever that is for each person, but you look back and hopefully realize, oh, actually there was no right or wrong. There is no end there, which is good news in that you can just kind of breathe. You don't have to worry about doing it right or getting through it fast, because it's just not a thing.
Yeah. And then my other thing would be to find other widows. I cannot tell you the comfort that comes from spending time with people who just get it. I mean, a week and a half ago, I was sitting on a beach with 5 other women who I met through Mom Goes On. And you don't have to talk grief the whole time, but being in the presence of women that just understand, like, I can't tell you what it does for your spirit and your soul and your heart. And it just eases the burden. And I wish I would have found that sooner, because it's so hard, particularly when you're younger. I was 40 when Noe passed away. And although sometimes I'm like, man, that's really old. Other times I'm like, oh, that's so young.
Yeah.
It's like they're out there, I promise you. And find your people.
Yeah. Yeah. What led you to Mom Goes On? Was it the podcast first? How'd you wind
Yeah,
up there?
it was the podcast. So New Year's Day, 2022, I was like, okay, if we're going to get the gold star, like someone's done this. Someone's got to tell me like how to do this. Like there's someone out there. And so I just started searching, and I think I actually searched widowed mom, and like you're the first thing that popped up, and I started binging the episodes. And what I discovered, and I think episode 4 is the Mom Bill of Rights. I was like, oh, like it's not just me. And I felt so seen and understood. And there's just something that comes with that, which is why you got to find your people, because I was just lost in this big sea surrounded by people who just like didn't get it. And I was like, I needed something. And every morning as I would get ready, like 3, 4, 5 episodes, depending on how long they were, every morning. And then come March, 3 months later, I was like, okay, like, I think this is what I need. And I applied and then started in April.
Wow. What was it like compared to what you expected it might be like?
So the coaching calls, I think, were the biggest surprise because I expected to be more intimidated. But I have this ability every time I'm on a call with you, I just forget there's anybody else there because yours is the only face that I see. And so it's just like having a conversation like with a friend. And so those were also some of the moments where I felt like you have the biggest things kind of click in your brain that you can't necessarily get to on your own.
Yeah. You seem to be on, I'm not like I went back and looked at the attendance record or anything, but you're on a lot of calls, right? I see you, even when you don't have your camera on, you're on a lot of calls. What has it been like to listen to other people's coaching when you're not the one getting coached?
So in the beginning, I would be really attentive and be like, I'm soaking in like all of this. Now that I've done it for a little bit longer, sometimes I'll be multitasking. Shh, don't tell Krista.
Yeah. She'll never know.
And but I'm always expecting for there to be at least one thing for it to remind me and be like, okay, because the brain is a tricky little devil, and you have to kind of keep reminding yourself even of some of those basics. And that's kind of what it does for me. It just kind of keeps me on track now and focused, because I think it would be too easy otherwise to allow some of those doubts and thoughts that I have about myself or, anything else to creep back in, kind of like mints you forgot to pull out of a bed.
And should have put in a pot in the first place. But I mean,
Right.
Hindsight. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it is. Those calls are like weeding a garden. Like you have to be diligent. Otherwise, like chaos takes over.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not even just grief. I mean, I don't know what the ratio feels like for you that it was, but I think people are usually surprised that so much of the opportunities actually is stuff we've been thinking about ourselves and what's possible for us in our lives for decades.
Yeah.
And if we don't address it, it's like a roadblock. And some of it's grief, of course, but a lot of it's not.
Yeah.
So yeah. So what's life like these days? Where are you with kind of your whole faith experience? What's changed? What is life like?
So I will say my faith, it's something I had to completely knock down to and even rip up some of the foundation and rebuild. But I got to rebuild it as an adult and mindfully and purposely rebuild it. And it is stronger now and sweeter now than it has ever been. And that's one of the things that I always hope when people look at me is that they can see Jesus, like in my story, because it took a really long time for me to be able to say that God is good and that he is faithful and that he is sweet to me. And it feels really good to be in that place again. And to watch my kids walk out their grief journey and watch God kind of guide them individually through that has been really a beautiful part of our story. And I'll say too, for my kids, finding them their people and resources so they can be around other kids that have lost parents that understand what they're going through was an important part of their journey and is a beautiful part of how our story has unfolded and being able, because we're important parts of each other's stories. And would we have our husbands back in a split second? But I am so incredibly grateful for the women I've met and the friendships that I've built through this journey. And I would not want to do life now without them.
Yeah. I love that for you. And it's a both, right? It's an and. Like we don't have to, we can want them back and wish it hadn't happened and be so happy with, who we've met and how we've grown along the way. It's an and.
And I tell people that all the time, that and is the beautiful part of the story, that you can have both exist at the same time. The joy and the grief, the pain, but also like all those happy things that happen, they all sit together and make the picture all the more beautiful.
Yeah, I think they make it all, it's what makes it all work. It can't be just one or just the other. It has to be, you have to have the contrast. Yeah. Was there anything you had hoped we would cover that we didn't?
So the only thing I would probably want to add is that Mom Goes On allowed me to work on all the stuff that's in my head while my heart healed. And I feel like for me, that's the order things had to go into. Because sometimes you got to boss your emotions around. And
it's like your ducks. You got to tell them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does not work.
Doesn't work. No. I like that. Yeah. Very good. Okay. So completely random question, but
yes.
What are your favorite things that you're growing right now? Oh, I know. It's like, did I ask you to pick a favorite child?
I love you and hate it when people ask me this question. So I will say one of my favorite things in general to grow is basil. And I have 18 different varieties of basil that I grow from seed every year. And people that don't garden, they're like, what do you mean there's 18? I was like, actually, there's more. But yes. And so I love to be able to just grow things that you can't find in the store. And I did add grapes and loganberries this year, which
I had to Google
too.
By the way, I didn't know what a loganberry was when you said it.
Yes, I'm very excited. So,
and fuchsia flowers. Also, you told me about fuchsia flowers, which I had never seen before.
Look it up. They're stunning and they exploded after all the rain we had. They're very vibrant.
Very good. Well, listen, thank you for being you. And thank you for telling people your story. I know it's going to resonate and some people are going to feel really seen listening to you. Yeah.
Thanks, Krista. I appreciate it.
I love you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Take care. If you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and want to create a future you can truly get excited about even after the loss of your spouse, I invite you to join my Mom Goes On coaching program. It's small group coaching just for widowed moms like you, where I'll help you figure out what's holding you back and give you the tools and support you need so you can move forward with confidence. Please don't settle for a new normal that's less than what you deserve. Go to coachingwithkrista.com and click Work with Me for details and next steps. I can't wait to meet you.